Rishabh. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Sudeep. Great to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to discuss all things scale with you. But before we start with the technical side of scale, Rishabh, I really want to touch upon what it takes to scale. For example, let's take an example of number of years of experience. So I believe that with the democratization of knowledge, it's easier for anyone to learn quickly and deliver value when you're exposed to the right opportunity. But on the other side, I also see discussions around, well, your craft can't be considered seriously if it's not backed with a certain number of years of experience. So have you ever faced statements like this and people saying that, oh, you're too young to be trusted with such a high visibility, high impact project?
Yeah, thanks. This is a great question. I think good question to be asked. To be honest, like if somebody asks me that, I'll be very happy. That great. If they think that yeah, you're too early to tackle this problem, I think like yeah, I can totally see why a lot of these questions might get considered when you can considered for a high impact project. The point I am gonna share is not it's just my personal views and not my like employers or ex-employers essentially, but the at least what I see is like, do you have experience in facing the problems? So this might be that like you spend like 15 years in the domain and still you haven't kind of faced the hard problems and still you're clueless about it. So the one of the things which I value a lot is like how many brain cycles have you spent in like trying to understand the problem, trying to go deeper, trying to really kind of play around, get your hands dirty with the data, see where the problems are, get to a good solutions, kind of get to an incrementally harder and harder baseline so that even next month you kind of tackling a harder system, which is a harder baseline to beat. So I think for me, it's like if you spend like X years solving it versus 3X years solving it, again, as long as you've kind of faced the problems and solved them before and you have experience and you can foresee, right, that, hey, 2 months down the line, this is what I'm going to face. 3 months down the line, these are the kind of problems I'm going to face. So as long as your thinking is not short term, you can kind of devise solutions which are long term, linking it back to the years of experience, right? So some people might take a lot longer to do this, especially if you're focused on one problem and you're going deeper there, versus if you're aware of a lot of other problems going on within your team, around your team, then you start kind of learning not just from your own work, but then a lot from the other people's work as well. And this is especially true when I was interning at Microsoft Research. I kind of went back there like 3-4 times during my PhD. So one of the things which I was very intentfully doing was trying to be aware of all the projects going on, because this is the time I have in a big company which has kind of done ML at scale and deployed it. So it's not just about my project which I'm aware of, but then it's more like that. Can you be the gossip person, understanding like, hey, what's going on? Maybe like, hey, in the London office, in the Beijing office, some other data sets are getting created, and these people are facing some of those problems. So I developed a knack for like really understanding what's going on across the company rather than just my own team or my own department. And essentially, what that means is even as an intern, right, I would have a lot more understanding of what's going on. And you can kind of literally go in. The first thing I do is like, even when I join ShareChat, right, first thing you do is like, okay, what are the open docs, right? I mean, go to Google Drive, find out, hey, I mean, what are the docs from the head of AI, from the CEO, because you start kind of, to me, it makes sense that if I start grabbing this bird's eye view of what's going on, then I can situate the project and even like maybe pick up part of my project, which is a lot more relevant to maybe some VP's overall pitch for this year, right? uh, how is it linked back to experience? So you may end up learning a lot in a 3 month internship in a company versus you might spend 3 years and still don't know what your typical teams are doing, right? So basically, yeah. So one of the other things which is worth highlighting here, that when I used to go to Microsoft Research for a few internships which I did during my PhD, then I used to spend a lot of time in not just understanding my project and my team's projects, but then also what's going on in the wider org, in the wider company. So this is not just if I'm in Redmond, then what's going on in the MSR New York lab, what's going on in MSR India, MSR London, what's going on in the Beijing team. Are they developing some different knowledge graph based projects which I can start using? So this is where like you can spend 3 years in a company and still not know what's going on in your parent org, or you can spend like 3 months as an internship and still be aware of like, hey, what's going on across the different teams across different regions. So this is to me like where like essentially if somebody's spending a lot of time in like being curious about what the problems people are facing, what kind of solutions are they solving, then you start learning a lot. This is also where like, I mean, not just here, right? If I'm at LinkedIn, again, if I go to LinkedIn, I keep a check of what kind of jobs are different companies posting. So what's the staff engineer opening on Square or on Lyft, right? What are the problems they are solving? So not just because that I'm interested in this role, but then just to understand that how are even their teams is structured. Why are they hiring this staff engineer? What kind of, I mean, again, in that huge description of what the role is, there's going to be 3 to 4 points about what this team specifically does. That's when you start kind of learning and then bridging the points across different companies. Oh, there is a team on trust and safety, they start doing this. Oh, there's a team on ML infrastructure, they start doing this, right? So even if you haven't faced these problems, just by being a bit more vigilant on the job openings on LinkedIn, on what's going on in the company, you can start kind of connecting the dots at the high level, right? So all of these things means that you don't have to spend 10 years solving these problems, but then again, right, you won't have as rich an experience if somebody has spent 10 years solving this problem, but at least you can try to compensate and say that, hey, I know what's going on, at least I have a sense of what's going on, and then I can start connecting the dots, and maybe you have a lot more richer mental framework of tackling some of these problems than when you're literally at like years of experience zero in this domain. So coming back together, right, I think if I look at a bunch of this, what I'm trying to say is that, can I, without even having the number of years of experience, can I simulate the problems, mentally face them, see what kind of approaches I might have taken and how they might have failed? That would give me like a x months advantage to somebody who's just starting to think about this problem today. So even without having that job, I can simulate on like a bunch of different topics and see where I could land. And then maybe there's a paper which I read, and or a blog post which I link. I'm like, oh yeah, actually I was thinking about this problem 2 years ago. This is a solution. Great. At least on that problem, I've advanced like maybe 2 months more without even touching like that problem in my day job, right? So I think this is where there's a lot of ways in which people can and should compensate the lack of years of experience, as long as you're kind of being curious about, hey, what's going on, and like being mindful about like connecting the dots essentially.
Yeah, I think Rishabh, I can say that you've revealed your success recipe to scale, because frankly speaking, whatever you've mentioned in terms of the kind of preparation, like it's almost sounds like you're being on toes. You know what happens in your org, within your org, maybe across the geographies, and then you're looking outside. You know what's happening in another organizations, to
Right.
the point that how they're structuring the team, why they're rolling out an opening. So I think this is a lot of homework. If somebody does, they're bound to scale, I can say.
That's true, but also like it's, yeah, I agree. It's also like it's very cumulative, right? Because it's like it's kind of it has a compounding effect, because you
Yes.
already know, and then any new information you have, you can kind of go back and fit it into your mental model, and then like it makes sense, right? So I think like
Yeah.
the more you, it gets easier. I mean, especially in research, right? I mean, as a PhD student, I had to understand what's going on in this domain. Who are the people working on it? What are their PhD students working on it? What are the proposals getting accepted? So I think way
Mhm.
back, like 2014, 10 years ago, when I started working on some of these topics, by definition, I mean, to write a paper, I had to cite related work. So then that means like you're getting trained for it. So one
Yeah.
of the examples of like how a PhD could help, or like if you're doing a due diligence work on understanding what's going on, you have to be aware of like what are the other papers, what are the other solutions in this space, and then start treating them as baselines, right? So I think if I look way back, right, I think this is when, just to write a related work section, which might be boring for new PhD students, you have to kind of do all that groundwork and then be aware,
Yeah.
because you don't want to miss. Like, I mean, suddenly somebody did an internship at Google Research, and then they write a paper about this, and then suddenly you're caught unaware, right? Which is not expected from you, because if you're working on a topic, you're expected to be aware of who's working on it, what's going on, what are the problems they're solving, what are the grants they are writing. So I think I could literally trace this back a lot to, I mean, like just one small section of related work in a paper, and why this kind of muscle starts building up in a few of these PhD students.
Yeah, and talking about PhD, there's another angle to scale that I'm just thinking of, that what kind of choices you make early on in your career. Like I see that your PhD was focused on efficient machine learning models. So I'm really excited to know that how did you choose the topic, and what piqued your interest? Were you able to foresee that it's gonna make an impact in your career?
I mean, retrospectively, it's easy for me to say yes, maybe.
Connecting
But
the
yeah, I mean,
dots? Yeah.
yeah, connecting, it's always easier to look back and see, okay, yeah, this makes sense, this doesn't make sense. But yeah, I think like it, again, a lot of my PhD work on efficient learning from user interactions and learning from making better decisions, essentially. So what I did was, I always wanted to be in a working in a topic which is dealing with a lot more kind of actual real world data. So it's often like, again, it's not always the case, but then often you might end up in an academic program which is a little more academic and rather slightly less practical and pragmatic. So
Yeah.
this is why, I mean, off topic, but then it's always encouraging if people spend some time in the industry, do some internships, then go back and do their PhD, because then you're at least like aware of the kind of problems which are actually getting solved in the industry at large scale,
Hmm.
rather than like cooking up a problem just because you have that data set and that's the only data set you have, right? So I
Yeah.
think in my topic you mentioned, right, I mean, how do we make efficient learning about user understanding? So the efficiency part over there was that my PhD topic was on search task, that
Hmm.
from users interactions with the system, can I understand what their task is? So it's like this: you go to google.com or you go to Bing these days, because ChatGPT is powering Bing and people are going all crazy about it. uh, and I had worked on Bing systems way back in 2015 as an intern. So great to see Bing kind of coming back up. But essentially, if I look at like just task understanding and how do we make efficient ML models for that, what I wanted to do was understand from one single user's query what's going to happen next. So I mean, again, it's a very simplified version, but then imagine like if you're kind of planning a wedding or like planning a travel. So if you're planning a trip to London, you're gonna maybe search for flights to London. The moment I have that query like flights to London, then I mean, a usual system will then kind of suggest you that here are the flights, here is what's cheap, what's available. But then a task-aware system will understand that, hey, maybe why is the user querying flights to London? Maybe there's an underlying task. And that task is, oh, they may be planning a trip to London. That means if they're searching flight, they're going to search for visa. Then they're going to search for accommodation. Then they're going to search for like, maybe if you're a vegetarian, you're going to search for vegetarian restaurants. You're going to search for like how much what are the transportation like? What are the weather like? So I think like just from one single query, you can extrapolate a lot about users' next 3 to 4 months of behaviors, at least on a certain dimension, and then do a lot of like proactive recommendation. So when I say efficient, right, this is what efficient meant. That I don't want user to tell me like 10 queries. From a single query, can I extrapolate a lot? And then kind of, I mean, this is making the conversation back and forth between the system and the user a lot more efficient, right? So efficiency has like multiple ways, right? I mean, like efficient ML models, efficient learning. This was like efficient conversation between the system and the user. And then from minimal interactions, can I extrapolate a lot and do some sort of active learning that maybe this is what you want, maybe not. And then can I foresee that, hey, this is what the user might end up doing? And that's where like you can kick in a lot of like recommendation tasks as well. So this is what I was kind of working on during my PhD. Uh, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's an interesting example, actually, and I have a follow-up on this. So when we talk
Right.
about somebody who is booking a flight from A to Z location, for example, there is a lot that we can give as a package to that user so that it makes their
Right.
job easy. And I think this is the purpose of technology, right? That the same person doesn't need to hit multiple queries to get what they want.
Right.
But what I want to know is that maybe for the flight bookings or something, there is a particular organization who wants to pitch that so that they get their sales or the tickets being sold
Right.
out, right? For related to every other thing, is there an aggregation? Like who would be the person, who would be the one who would want to know that user journey for the next 3 to 4 months? Who are the players in the market? Are they different
Right.
folks?
Yeah, I think like I mean, right now the system is still like very fragmented, right? It's not like that.
Yes.
Hey, I mean, it's like this, right? I mean, if I book again in Delhi, in Bangalore, in London, I mean, I go to Uber to book a cab. Maybe it's not available. Maybe the prices are high. I go to like other like Lyft. I go to like Ola. I go to other apps, right? So it's like I don't care whether I'm riding a Uber ride or another apps, right? So there's no interface between me and the system. I don't want to deal
Yeah.
with like some of these
Yes.
I mean, I want just give me the quickest cab in the most efficient price, and that's what I want, right? So this is where I mean you're starting to see like Skyscanner being one of them. Like I don't want to go into like, let's see what the Air India flight is, what the Lufthansa flight is. I mean, you have these aggregators, right? But then what are the aggregators across task? Because
Yes.
right now we have aggregators on a per task level, that if I need to kind of order a food, I can go to Zomato, I can go to Uber Eats or Deliveroo in the UK. If I want to book a flight, I can go to Make My Trip, I can go to like Skyscanner, right? But then like if you start looking at task, then there are these subtasks like flight booking, visas, accommodation. Then
Yeah.
which are some of these aggregators across subtask? That's where I think like some of the, I mean, right now, if you look at like when I was doing my PhD, this was mostly conversational agents. So this is like Apple Siri or Cortana or some of these conversational agents or your search history or your browser. Some of these are the aggregators which you have. Now, I think some of u.com is a great search engine example, right? Which is kind of getting developed by Richard Socher. Uh, and again, that those are the systems which are, if there is a personalized agent which is keeping track of like what you're doing and what your needs are, then they can start making some of these proactive recommendation, right? Maybe I mean, like there is no system right now, at least which I use, which knows that, hey, I have an American Express card and that has a discount on flights from certain kind of travel agency. And then like I know they know that I'm planning a trip, right? So who's connecting the dots here? So you see, I
Yes.
mean, on Gmail, right? You see a lot of promotions happening, and like, I mean, I don't have time to go through all these promotions. But then, like, if I'm somewhere visiting a friend or something, and there's a nice Cafe Nero has a discount of 15% for Amex holders, right? So because these systems are not aligned in
Yes.
a way, and there's a, as you mentioned, right, there's no common aggregator, which could be my digital assistant.
Yeah.
And this is where the other problem comes in, right? Do I want to give it access to all the data I have? And that's where the trade-off starts coming in, hopefully. Again, like I'm not expert. As a user, I can comment that I would love to do that, but then I can totally see different users having that preference on what value does the system give us versus what sort of privacy invasion happens for me as a user, right? Because I'm literally trusting you with my Gmail, with my American Express, with my a lot of this data, right? Now,
Yeah.
very interesting, right? People don't look at it from that way. If you look at Visa, so Visa
Mhm.
card, right? I mean, Visa card has a bunch of these interactions of financial interactions happening across different merchants and different users at
Mhm.
scale across the world, right? So
Okay.
this is where, I mean, we don't view Visa or MasterCard or American Express as these aggregators. But
Mhm.
then, like beyond the browsers, beyond the Google search engine, the cards which you're using for all the financial transactions, right? They're also amazing aggregators. And to the
Mhm.
extent that if you want to predict like whether a company's GDP is going down, going up, you don't have to wait for economists to kind of do it in like a yearly basis, right? Visa,
Yeah.
MasterCard, they have access to all the financial transactions. When COVID started hitting, they were the first. I mean, I don't know if they were the first or not, but then they could literally see that, hey, I mean, the purchases are going down, or some of these actual
Correct.
economic activities in the society are kind of shaping up in certain different ways. What's my point?
Mhm.
My point is when you talk about aggregators, we again, right, there are some aggregators which you are aware of, but
Mhm.
there's a suite of aggregators which we aren't even using because we haven't gotten around to that dimension of me trusting the system with all my heterogeneous 360-degree data. And again,
Yes.
right, just a long shot, maybe that's where like a decentralized system which works across like a blockchain system could come
Yeah.
in maybe in the future and like start solving some of those problems for us. But yeah, that's way too again, I have no deep understanding of how blockchains could or could not work. But then maybe my
Yeah.
hypothesis is in a decentralized world, when none of the American Express or Google or Facebook owns all of my data, then maybe like there is a layer in which a decentralized systems can exist, wherein my social data and my financial data can also interact with each other, and then there is a layer of
Yeah.
recommendation which can operate across different blockchains, and then maybe make some recommendations. But this is like maybe I don't know what I'm talking about, but maybe like 10 years down the line.
Yeah, I think we are hoping for that. And somewhere I believe that whenever we talk about as a user, and when you face a little bit of inconvenience in terms of any of the activity or something that you want to do, you think that, hey, can't technology do this much? Haven't we advanced that much? And we talk about
Right.
digital world and we are living in this century. But on the other side, when we talk about economies of scale, I think economies of scale come where you have these common
Right.
aggregators, everybody talking to each other, and there are systems who kind of expose that information, right?
Right.
Then those fears start coming into the picture that okay, I'm getting like you mentioned also that there's a trade-off. Like I'm getting some convenience, but what am I paying for this? Like, so how would a user understand this dilemma? Because they need to be a little bit more aware of what they are choosing for in terms of convenience. But at the so one is from the user perspective and another is from the organization perspective. How can they ensure that they're able to win the trust of the end user? Because we are living in that world where they both need to be, trusting each other in terms of reaping the benefits of technology.
I think it's a great question. It's also a very hard question to answer. Again, and I'm no expert in some of these topics, but the way I see like developing trust, at least in a recommendation system, right? Because that's what my background has been for the last few years. So I think like from again, there's a user lens that do I trust the system? Should I trust the system? And can I benefit from it? Versus the platform take like, hey, can I develop a trustworthy bridge between the user and us? So let me take the platform angle first. Maybe then I can come back to the user angle. So from platform perspective, right? If I'm able to explain my recommendations and then provide some sort of understanding and trust that, hey, I have your best interest in mind, and here is why I did something. Here is why, if you want me not to do it, I would not do it, right? So I think even providing that mechanisms, right? Right now, if I go to google.com, then there's no, I mean, again, you can click on something and say not interested. Like on Instagram, right? Explore tab. You click on a video, long press on a video, it'll be like not interested, and suddenly the next feed is
Yes.
not going to show some of those videos, right? So
Yeah.
this is providing a kind of a gamified way of like me providing input and the system responding. Now, if you look at the Spotify homepage, there's a bunch of playlists on the home which is under a explanation that because it's Friday or your last played, right? So I think some of these you start looking at the homepage and you start saying that there's an explanation. So all
Hmm.
of these are minor, subtle advance. If you go to youtube.com, then on the homepage of YouTube, you see that do you want medical dramas, do you want news, do you want the sports, do you want comedy? You click on that and then you start going there, right? So anytime I provide an input to the system and the system responds in a deterministic way,
Hmm.
then that is building the trust, right? And this is also where, I mean, one of the problems we're solving at ShareChat in my current company is coherence. So if you click on a video and I scroll down, the next set of videos, are they going to come in from the same topic, same genre, or are they going to be very different? That's
Hmm.
also a place wherein I mean, you have these habits getting created on a user, and the trust that, hey, if I'm watching a cricket video, I scroll down, I will see a bunch of cricket videos, right? It's not that I scroll down, suddenly there's a dance or romance video, right? So
Yeah.
all of these are, again, like that sequential model will be some sort of coherence, but then after maybe 10, 15 videos, then it knows that, hey, I mean, enough of cricket, you might want to start watching something else. So there you start diverging, right? So now we can imagine like even a sequential model, somebody who's like just a great ML engineer developing sequential models, they're also contributing intentionally, unintentionally on creating that trust, right? So this is what's my point. My point is each of the touch points which we platforms have with users, there is a chance in which like suddenly you start seeing that maybe there's a track over here wherein this track or this video shouldn't be there. Is it a sponsored thing? Or like, I mean, and are you even showing that disclaimer to me? So I think, I mean, some of it is regular.
Yeah, I think I couldn't hear you.
Yeah,
Mistakenly, I think that got touched somewhere.
I'm just gonna get rid of this.
Yeah. Is it
Better?
like because it's in the air, it gets shaken a bit and that's why it's happening? Because the voice quality was really good.
Let's give it a try. I'm not gonna. Sorry, but you'll have to do a lot of post editing here.
Okay. So,
Cable.
totally up to you. Like,
No, yeah, I still would want to. I mean, it's just a bit more. It's easy for me. It's just hard work for you.
yeah.
Let me see to make it a little more sturdy. I have to get
Yeah.
a different setup for this. Okay, this works, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, because voice quality is good, I just don't want to compromise on that. I was thinking maybe I'll take some bit of work in editing.
Oh,
That's
perfect, right,
fine.
perfect.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry about this. I'm hoping that. Yeah,
And
I'll
I'm
try.
sorry that you need to repeat those things
No,
because
it's
of
fine.
this
Yeah.
whole. Okay. So
Sorry, what were you talking about?
you were just about to start, and then I think I remember till the point where you were saying the person should be shown the next similar video or the different video, and
Right.
that's where it starts diverging. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. Yeah. So I think if we start looking at all of these together, right, then each of the touch points which users have with some of these systems, there is a chance of establishing trust and building that trust, right? I mean, even like expectations, inculcating habits, you can't inculcate habits with users if you're not having that trustable, explainable system, right? So there's a lot of work going on in the explainable machine learning community, explainable recommendations. Why do I see this? So I think like, again, one of those topics is relevant here. A lot also around not just explainability, but like just providing reasons on like why am I seeing it. Even at Spotify, right, on the homepage, there's a Rex's paper on it from the home team way back in 2017, 2018. That Rex's paper is talking about explainable recommendations, like explain, exploit, explore, exploit, explain, exploration, exploitation, and explainable context. Because you want to do like a bandit based exploration, but then like you also want to provide recommendations in an explainable umbrella, because that's when like users want like, hey, maybe like, okay, because throwback Thursdays, or like because it's Friday, or like Sunday chills, right? So I think even the playlist names, All Out 80s. So All Out 80s is a playlist about 80s music, right? So then
Okay.
you have an expectation. So essentially, what's my point? My point is, as a platform, you have all these touch points wherein you can start building trust from like small pieces. And then I think the user might start trusting you with maybe like more, more kind of information needs and so on. One example is like chatbots, right? I mean, a few years ago when I would have used like Amazon Alexa or like Google Home, then I would have issued some hard query and it wouldn't have answered, right?
Yeah.
That failure meant that for the next 6 months, I'm not going to try that query again, because I now know that, hey, I mean, this sucks and it doesn't
Yeah.
work that way. But then like the moment it starts I mean, you have to rebuild that trust again, right? That, hey, okay, same on ShareChat search, on Spotify search, I mean, all of these platforms, right? You type in a query, if you don't provide in the sufficient results, then you're not going to type in those queries. If you look back like 4 or 5 years ago when Facebook introduced the search result page, before that, right, I could type in like Vidhi on Facebook and I literally go to your profile. There's no
Yeah.
search result page. Like 5 years ago, they removed that. And what happened was, if I type in Vidhi, I could go to the search results page, see your profile, but then a bunch of your posts, a bunch of other people named Vidhi and all, right? So this is where what happened, what would have happened was your time to success gets delayed, because if I wanted to go to your profile, then I'll literally just type in VID and then like suddenly go to your profile, right?
Yeah.
So there's a short-term loss, because short-term there's a lot more annoyance that, hey,
Yes.
I have to type in, I have to click enter, then go to the result page and then click on your profile, right? That's a lot more milliseconds of interaction. But then what happened was, because I could see the search result page, then the kind of queries I would issue, now I know that the system can also search post. I know the system could also search like groups, right? So even the variety of queries which I would enter to the system are increasing. So just one example that, of course, like I'm pretty sure, I mean, somebody from Facebook might confirm if you're talking with them sometime, that when you remove that, when you introduce that friction of search, then there's a short-term dip. But then because of that, the volume of search might have increased, because now users would be a lot more trusting of the system, that, hey, maybe I can start querying some of those as well, right? So
Yeah.
just another example, that on a platform, right, you might make like short-term losses in some of these metrics for eventually gaining a lot of like long-term metrics, and vice versa is also true. You make a lot of like short-term wins at the cost of long-term, like notifications. Another example, you bombard users with notifications, you're going to see a lot of like users coming back to the app, but then eventually like they get annoyed, they snooze the notification, and then long-term you kind of suffer, right? A bunch of
Yes.
examples on short-term, long-term. Rolling it back to the point you mentioned, right, platform level trust. So I think many touch points, which, yeah, which are kind of hopeful ways for platforms to start earning trust, especially in like multi-objective world, which is a
Yeah.
topic which, again, maybe in one of the questions we can dive deeper. But
Yeah.
as most of the recommendations we start showing to user are not just because of the user's interest, but because of platform interest or the creator interest, I think there's a lot more need of having an ever stronger bridge of trust between the user and platform, because the platforms are starting to be very explicitly multi-objective. That, hey, I'm giving you these recommendations not just because you like them, but because there's a shared interest with my other stakeholders, with my revenue, and all of it together, right? So I think like the ounce of trust needed in multi-stakeholder platforms is a lot more than before.
And correct me if I'm wrong, does the cohort also matter? Like, I belong to a certain cohort which has shown these kind of recommendations, and because on an average, the folks of my characteristics similar to me think like that and maybe have certain choices, and hence I'm one of those who I'm being bombarded with such kind of recommendations. This also plays a role.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, right? I mean, like way back 15 years ago, when matrix factorization was the de facto way of doing like a lot of recommendation, that literally says collaborative filtering, right? That, hey,
Yes.
because of similar users like you, they like that movie, I'm going to start recommending that movie. So I think if you trace back a lot of the progress on Rex's recommendation systems over the last 10, 15 years, it literally goes back to matrix factorizations and like saying that, hey, because five other users who like this movie also like that, I'm just gonna start recommending. So I think even the way we have shaped users understanding of our system is that, hey, maybe like it knows something about me, which, because of like 100 million other users like interacting with the platform, it knows a bit more about me than what I do. I mean, that gets into like creepy shady territory as well, which also links
Yeah.
back to the user trust, right? Because I mean, machine learning, when it works, is more like magic, right? At least at a point, and then it starts becoming very obvious that, of
Yeah.
course, like, I mean, right now, like, I mean, maybe like 2 years down the line, the chat GPT based interactions are like very normal to us, right? And we couldn't imagine a world wherein like I was literally typing in a query with 3 words, moving the word from here to there, and like typing a plus, typing the, I mean, pro search users, right? They
Yeah.
do type in a plus that I really want this term, I really want this site, so site colon stackoverflow.com. I mean,
I know.
this is what like I've been like searching, right, in the last, literally
Yes.
like up until the last month, right? But then maybe 2 years down the line, that's not how I search. I mean, I hope so. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And do you think that this trust part we are specifically talking about because AI comes into the picture? This is a probabilistic nature, or we see that there is a lot of downside associated with it? Because before that, I don't know how many technology advancements have happened in which trust used to be a limiting factor, that I would only use it. I know the benefits coming out of it, but I'll only use it if I have that kind of trust,
I mean,
unless you tell
trust
me
has
how
been
you're
around,
coming
right?
through.
Even
Yeah.
like way back in 2002, 2019, 99, right? I mean, I was a kid. I mean,
Mhm.
smaller kid, maybe. Yeah, I don't want to explain my age here, but
Okay.
yeah, essentially, right? I mean, like back when you had these like phones, right? I used to go to a PCO back in India and pay like 12 rupees to make a call, right? And there was a trust that if I pay 12 rupees for a minute, then the call
Mhm.
won't drop after 10 seconds. So every
Okay.
interactions which I've done, right? I mean, there's a sense of like determinism and trust. And then even the internet, right? I mean, the dial-up internet, the modems you had, right? I mean, they used to have
Yeah.
the weird beeping sound, right? There you won't know that like the video might not load, right? So you
Mhm.
won't even imagine like downloading a half a MB video way back then,
Absolutely.
because
Yeah.
so I think like there's always a notion of users expectation and trust, and then users adapt accordingly. And
Mhm.
again, right, the first time I same Google Home, I tried a query, it doesn't respond, I'm not going to go back to the same query for the same on PCO, right? If that PCO, I know that, hey, I paid 12 rupees and then that call doesn't go through, the call drops, I'm not going to start using it. So I think like it's I think it's a property of users interacting with like humans as well, and just any system, that like based on the few interactions, I'll develop a notion of trust, and then that's
Yeah.
my expectation later on. So it does get exacerbated based on ML models, because there's a lot of
Mhm.
like stochasticity over there. It's not deterministic, right? That I do
Yeah.
this happens, right? I mean, I do this, suddenly tomorrow something else happens. I mean, and literally, right? Our job is to make sure that the recommendations you get 2 hours later are different than what you got 2 hours before, right? So we're literally optimizing for that contextual
Yes.
awareness in my recommendation. So of course, like there's a lot of non-determinism involved here.
Yeah, and I think somewhere when you mentioned that with respect to platform, right, how to maintain the trust, and those are the reasons or the explanations given to the users that maybe because it's Thursdays or Fridays and 80s dilemma or something, right? So does user get an option of saying that your explanation makes sense to me, that I agree with that, and that kind of goes back as a feedback into the system?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think this is again like platform dependent. So some of the, I mean, at ShareChat we have something called bucket feeds. Like, let's say that there's a World Cup going on. So then on the trending feed, you'll see a lot of content which is trending. But then if I really want content about like the India Australia series going on, then there is a place in the app wherein I can click and then get that, right? Now, the question you asked, that is there a way for the user to tell me that, hey, this is not relevant versus I don't want this? I think this is where understanding implicit signals become really important, because
Mhm,
either you provide that mechanism for the user to
mhm,
kind of provide that feedback signal to you, and again, right, even if you provide that, maybe 1% of users ever use it at all, so then it's very sparse, right? I mean, like, not a lot of users are going to kind of
yes.
provide that feedback, right? I mean, pro users are only maybe going to provide feedback, and then like that feedback is also clouded because it's coming in from a very small sample of users. It's not representative at all. You may or may not trust it. You'll have to do a lot of adjustments on it. But then I think the way in which most of the companies tackle it right now are understanding implicit behavior. That
Hmm.
that if I go to this bucket feed on ShareChat, which is about India Australia cricket matches, and then if watched a couple of videos, and then suddenly I kind of abandoned and then went somewhere else.
Mhm,
So if I'm able to detect that shift in journey, that the user actually clicked on a hashtag which was about cricket, went watched a few couple of videos, and then immediately abandoned and then went somewhere else, right? If I'm able to measure that journey, measure and then understand that, hey, there's an abandonment here, and this means that overall the journey might be good, the app is still doing good, but then the feed which is just about cricket, maybe that didn't do a good job, because
mhm,
maybe on an average we expect users to watch like 7 videos and this user only watched 2 videos. So same used to happen on search, right? I mean, search engines were literally trained on quickbacks. So if you click on a document and if you look at the document only for 2 seconds and then come back, it's a quick
mhm.
back. So you're not
Yeah.
your dwell time on that document is not high enough. So then you're not happy. But then if you spend like 30 seconds on it or more, then yeah, you spend kind of you read through the document, you understand it a bit more. So then maybe you like it. What's my point? My point is uh the you mentioned, right, that how would are there feedback loops, are there communication channels, right? I
Mhm,
think a lot is on the platform designers and the data scientists and ML engineers and the data engineers looking at it to understand the traces of user interaction data and then make sense
mhm,
out of it. So this is where, I mean, like, we did some work during my time at Spotify on intent understanding as well. So
mhm,
I mean, the interpretation of the intent of the interaction signal is also very much intent dependent, that if you're skipping a lot of tracks, maybe you're unhappy, or maybe you just are sampling tracks. You're creating a playlist for a home party later tonight, and then you're just sampling a
mhm,
few tracks and then trying to understand, is this track good, and add it to a playlist. So I think understanding these interaction signals and then interpreting what it could mean in that given context, and then using that as a feedback label for your ML models, that's where a lot of like large scale machine learning comes in, right? And again, because this is about all scale, this is what learning at scale from like user interactions means, right? Because the
mhm,
same interaction signals for you might convey a different meaning, the same interaction signals coming in from me might convey a different meaning, and understanding these interaction signals at scale means the platform has to develop and contextualize, right, and condition that, hey, your the user feedback condition on user's history is this. So because I
mhm.
know that Vidhi doesn't skip a lot, and now she is skipping a lot, right? Then that means like, hey, I mean, this is something wrong. Or I know that you like Rishabh is a high skip user anyway, and
Mhm.
again, it's nothing extraordinary for him, right? So I think this is where
Yeah.
like you have to kind of do this interpretation at scale as well, and not just like efficient learning and all.